Hey guys, and welcome to or back to the Paws in Pursuit podcast with your host Summer Clark. So today we have a very exciting guest. We have Kamal Fernandez, who is coming on the podcast to talk all about over-arousal and reactivity in our agility dogs. Kamal was very highly requested from you guys when I asked you for guest and topic ideas lately. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Weekly recap. God damn it. Weekly recap wise, I have nothing for you because it's, what day is it? Friday. And the last podcast episode I recorded for 2 days ago was 3 days ago on the Tuesday night. So literally nothing has happened except I went training as usual and it was completely the same in 3 days. So no weekly recap for you guys today. So, not a terrible thing because that means we can get straight into the episode with Kamal, and I hope you all enjoy the conversation. Now, I would just like to take a minute to introduce you guys to the podcast sponsor, Huel. So here I have one of the ready-to-drink Huel meals, the berry flavour. Huel ready-to-drink is a meal in a bottle with over 20 grams of protein. It really is the perfect meal for when you're on the go. You don't need to sacrifice convenience or nutrition, you can have both with ready-to-drink. Each serving has 26 vitamins and minerals. This means every bottle of ready-to-drink has 175 health benefits. It is made from natural ingredients such as coconut, sunflower seeds, tapioca, pea protein, flax seeds, and hemp seed protein. Every meal is vegan and it has no gluten, no palm oil, no GMO, no lactose and no animal products whatsoever. It comes in 8 delicious flavours including iced coffee caramel and strawberries and cream, as well as the classics like vanilla, chocolate and banana. It is absolutely delicious and just tastes like a milkshake. It is widely sold in supermarkets, petrol stations and corner shops around the UK, and it can be conveniently purchased online. I found out about Huel because I was looking for a product that would give me all the nutrients that I need while travelling to events and staying over at competitions and training events. So when it's time to refuel and have a meal, I can just drink a ready-to-drink Huel product and get all my nutrients quickly, easily and without cooking. It's perfect when I don't have the time or the facilities to cook. For example, when I'm camping at a competition, I'm going to be drinking at least one a day at KCI and Dogs in Need. If you're super busy just like me, then you really don't want to miss out. You can easily and conveniently shop ready to drink from Huel at the link uk.huel.com/paws. I hugely appreciate anyone and everyone that uses my link as it helps keep this podcast running, and every sale through that link helps keep my podcast going. Buying through my link also gets you a free t-shirt which will be auto applied at the checkout. If you subscribe to a Huel order, you can save 10%. You can choose how often your subscription comes, for example every 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, etc. And these are super easy to manage on the website and you can edit whenever you like. uk.huel.com/paws. So if you just want to start off with just introducing yourself for anyone who doesn't know who you are.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, thank you for having me on your podcast. My name is Kamal Fernandez. I'm a professional dog trainer, a dog sports coach, and a reactivity specialist. I've been doing this for about 33 years. I've been training dogs, and I've done a wide range of dog sports, primarily obedience, in which I've had a level of success in that discipline. But I've also competed in agility and working trials and dabbled in IGP as well. So, and I've coached people from those relevant sports. So yeah, a little bit of experience under my belt.
Perfect. So the first question is, what are your tips for cueing for an agility run with a dog that gets overexcited easily?
Yeah, so that's a really common problem for agility dogs where, excuse me, I'll start that again. Frog in my throat, I'll start that again.
That's all right.
So that's a really common problem for people in agility where their dogs get really aroused in the queue, and it is somewhat of a systemic problem in that the dogs are allowed to sort of find their or get aroused by watching other dogs train in a training environment, and that then gets exaggerated when they're in competition. So really it means taking a backward step and teaching your dog to obviously have the boundary games is going to really help you. Crate games is going to really help you. Focus for you is going to really help you, and a distinct switch on and switch off word so the dog understands when you need them to be focused. And obviously, when your dogs are young and you're bringing them through the process of prepping them for competitions, take them to agility shows and have them mill around the rings, but be focused on you. Desensitize them to the cueing picture, so go to the cues where you're not going to be actually running a dog, and linger around them and do focus exercises so they get accustomed to being in that environment and not necessarily fixating and hyping up watching the other dogs, because the fallout is that they then get over-aroused, which then creates a different energy that you're running within course, or the dog not being receptive to what you're asking them. So a really, really important thing to address as you're prepping your dog for shows.
So a lot of it is more about, the preparation, the foundations. And I think that's why as well we see, like, for example, my Spaniel's a lockdown puppy, but instead of being overexcited, he was the other way. He was really nervous because he didn't get that sort of, that foundation around the ring before he actually started his agility career. So a lot of it has nothing to do with agility and a lot to do with, what we expose our dogs to when they're young, basically.
Absolutely, yeah. And, the thing is, you don't have to, often a fundamental mistake that people often make is they take their agility puppy to agility shows to socialise them, and that's too big a distracting environment for your puppy to start off with. Take them to, boot fairs, take them to an obedience show where it's not quite as exciting and fast moving. I can say that, the obedience, or a breed show, something that has dogs in the environment but isn't necessarily highly energetic, so that you can go off in a corner and you can work on your focus skills and your engagement skills, and then progress to the dog being at an environment which is a little bit more enticing and enthralling for them.
And I think as well, a lot of agility people, can be, and I've been there, where it's easy to sort of get ahead of yourself, isn't it? So you want to rush straight to the agility, straight to, the fun stuff, but it's really important not to miss out that sort of more boring stuff.
Absolutely, it's an age-old mantra. Don't sacrifice what you want for what you want right now.
Yes.
And I think that's a really common thing that probably inexperienced dog trainers and dog sports competitors make, in that they want to sort of get to the elite level of sport. But anybody that's competed at the elite level of sport will tell you it's all about your basics done just well, basically.
Yeah,
or
definitely.
Your basics done at a more complex level. So if you look at, all the successful people, that consistently successful dog after dog after dog at any sport, you will see that they fastidiously train their foundations.
Yes, definitely.
They don't cut corners. They are working on those little nuances of behaviour over and over and over again, and they're taking it to lots of environments. So the dogs, by the time they get to an agility competition and ultimately the elite level, the dog finds that an absolute walk in the park in comparison to the level of training that they've had.
Yeah. So what would you say then if a dog is sort of an adult now and already competing in agility, and it's kind of too late for the owner to do that puppy stuff because it is an adult dog and it's already in that world, and they get overexcited in the queue? How would you sort of go about kind of reteaching the dog how to behave in that scenario when you can't do it from scratch if it's an adult?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, when you train dogs, there's three things that you can do. You can train a behaviour, you can ignore a behaviour, or you can manage a behaviour. And all those things are going to interplay. So sometimes you're going to try and train something. If it's an established issue that you've had for a number of years, you've got to be realistic about the timeline it will take you to fix that. Often people, in the desire to compete or to attend shows, they sort of compromise on the really putting that time in, which is absolutely fine. I have that candid conversation with a lot of my clients and students and people that I work with. Let's be honest with ourselves. Are we really going to pull this dog out of competing for a year? That's just about to go for the world team or try out for the world team to sort a start line problem? No, you're not, because you're on the throes of competing. That's absolutely fine. But let's make peace with the fact that then we'll compromise on our proficiency in that particular skill. So it really is about being honest with yourself and being truthful of, well, am I willing to put the work needed to fix the problem, and am I willing to pull the dog out of competition? That's the first thing to ask yourself, and there is no right and wrong answer. Some people will say, yes, absolutely, I'm happy to do that, it doesn't matter to me, this is really important, I can see the greater picture. Other people say, no, honestly, I'm not going to, because I want to compete, my dog is in its prime and I want to get on. So that's the first thing, be honest with yourself. Secondly is, if you have a dog with that issue, be consistent if you can with whatever principle. So if you consistently say, do you know what, I'm gonna let the start line or whatever it is go, I'm gonna let that I'm gonna choose to manage it, then be open and honest with yourself and go, well, that requires me having a stringent process in place, of having a second person with me that might cue for me, and so forth and so forth. But be realistic of going, well, if you're going to do that, then you cannot then complain, because that's the choice that you've made. You've got to just be honest and make peace with it. And if you have a dog that's got that issue, consider taking laterally about how you're going to fix the problem. So again, use other dog events to condition your dog that they can be focused on you and pretend to cue. You could go to a breed show and mill around the breed dogs and have, like, they all congregate to go in the ring. That essentially looks like a cue to a dog, without the level of energy that an agility show would provide. Go to boot fairs, etc. Massive people. Take one jump, do some pretend cueing there, work on that as a skill. Go to an obedience show, same thing, so that you can gradually work through it. Set a realistic timeline, and again, be honest with yourself, and record keep. That's a massive thing. A record keep, and keep collating data about what's going on. Often we can react to our dog's mistakes from a place of emotion rather than being analytical. You want to definitely be analytical when you're problem solving.
Yeah, definitely. And as well, once you do get to the level of going to an agility show with that overexcited dog, I suppose, if you're willing to, you could cue with the dog and then take it away from the agility setting so that it doesn't think every time it cues, it does agility, if that makes sense. But absolutely. Like you said, a lot of handlers probably wouldn't want to, throw all those runs, but,
Yeah, because, when you have a problem that's been established, you've got to be honest about how long does it take how long have I been allowing that behaviour to be rehearsed and therefore reinforced? Well, it's going to take you the same timeline to fix it. Obviously, hindsight's a wonderful thing. If you had a young agility dog and you were bringing it up through the process of competing, you would be really mindful of that. And as you went along, you would be doing lots of anti-cue training and doing arousal monitoring games, and you would be doing focus exercises. So the dog just become part and parcel of how the dog was raised.
Yeah.
Obviously, when you're attending seminars, you would be mindful of the dog getting overstimulated and so forth. But as I said, most people, it's very cultural in agility that it's almost like it's an accepted form of being, that the dogs can be really, really hysterical.
Yeah.
And everybody seems to be somewhat desensitized to it.
Yeah.
So,
it almost seems like people want that. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, but then that comes back to the greater question of the understanding between drive and arousal.
Yes, true.
If you went to an agility show, you see a lot of over-aroused dogs. You don't see very many that are truly driven. And the difference between that is like, night and day, because a dog that's in drive and has clarity and understanding is absolutely going to be faster than a dog that's headless and aroused.
Yeah, definitely.
So you will see a dog that's aroused, it'll be moving fast, but often it's wasting energy. It'll be taking big, wide, sweeping turns. It'll be taking putting excessive energy into things, and
lots of barking.
Lots of barking. It'll be expelling energy, so therefore it's going to be more fatigued. Therefore it won't be running at its absolute maximum. If you think of, you don't see Usain Bolt doing the 100-meter sprint shouting his head off. He's focused. He's driven. He's on exactly what he's supposed to be doing. And often we don't see that with our with agility dogs so much.
Yeah, like only putting their energy into what's actually necessary instead of all the other things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So number 2 is, why might a male dog bark or growl at some dogs but is playful and friendly with others?
Is that probably tied in with adolescence and testosterone? So obviously in adolescence, dogs go through various hormonal changes, same for people. And what can happen is they can start to display aggressive, anxious, thrill-seeking, boundary-pushing behaviour. And that's a really common place where a lot of us long-established behavioural problems can be created. If you looked up and down the country, I would say, or even the world, I'd say the vast majority of dogs that are put in rescue are probably adolescent dogs, because people hit challenges with their dogs and they go from being the cutesy wootsy puppy that largely is somewhat compliant and obedient and social, to an adolescent dog who's a bit more challenging. So I would definitely look at it from look at the dogs that they're interacting with. You would find that it'll probably be another male dog normally. It's a really consistent pattern. Or a dog that sometimes young male dogs can act, depending on the body language of the other dog, can be enough a trigger. So even if the dog is castrated, if it's got really strong body language, or if the dog hasn't necessarily been socialized with a broad spectrum of breeds or cultures of dogs, that can cause them to act in a concerned way, which they will growl and so forth and so forth. So I used to get that quite a lot with my boxer. When I used to go to agility shows and I had my boxer, just walking him through, he didn't do agility, but when I'd walk him through the rings or the car park, I would guarantee you I would have at least 5 dogs fly out and have a go at him.
All right,
if I walked through with my border collie, nothing would happen. But it's because, not that a boxer is a particularly unusual breed of dog, it's because most people probably don't have access to a social boxer to socialize their puppy
Yeah.
or their young dog.
Mm.
So then my boxer appeared as a strange entity in comparison to what most people would have exposed their young dogs to. I mean, I don't know about your dogs, but I don't know whether they've probably had any interactions with a brachiocephalic dog. It's probably for a lot of people, because we have our own beliefs, or, he might be strange, he might be, so we're reluctant to allow our dogs to mix with them. So therefore, they can develop that level of anxiety about particular unusual dogs or dogs that don't fit the mold for them.
Yeah.
So that can be another trigger.
I mean, I don't really know anyone with brachiocephalic dogs, so my dogs haven't really come across those. So if they did, yeah, they probably would be a little bit wary. But when you say it depends on the body language of the other dog as well, do you mean kind of whether the other dog is sort of, I don't know whether you believe in sort of the dominant or submissive kind of way of thinking with dogs, or is that kind of what you mean?
It's more that dogs, so often you'll find that, to be truthful, people don't necessarily understand the nuances of socialization. And dogs are naturally, by nature, dogs should be, it's a social creature. They're an animal that's predisposed to living in groups. So it tells you that by the nature of a dog is to get on with others, and they need to find a social equilibrium. But what often happens is, most people don't expose their dogs in a strategic, structured manner and give them constructive lessons. So what then happens is a dog will develop inappropriate social skills. So, for example, the overzealous chocolate Labrador at the park, because he's socially, he's what would be perceived as politically correct, i.e. he's really gregarious and friendly. That actually, from a dog's point of view, isn't appropriate social etiquette. So if you were in the high street and somebody come running up to you and overzealous and jumped all over you, and you pushed them away or acted defensively or, called the police, you would be deemed as correct, and the other person would be deemed as, they would probably be sectioned,
Yeah.
But from dogs, we don't seem to make that connection. The overzealous. So that's a common malpractice that people can fall foul to, where they allow their dogs to behave inappropriately because it isn't aggression. The dog isn't being aggressive, he's just being overzealous. Well, that's okay then.
Yeah.
Similarly, if you have a dog that lacks confidence, it's about giving the dog exposure or creating exposure to other dogs that are going to, be neutral, indifferent, etc. So, and I have a lot of dogs for residential training who come with major temperament or behavioural problems. And within 24 to 48 hours, I'll have them with all my dogs. And the reason being, it's not that my dogs are any different to anybody else's dogs, but what my dogs have been exposed to is really appropriate and strategic socialization. So I don't overexpose my dogs to anything. I don't take them to 101 places to socialize them. The caveat being if they have a good temperament. If they need confidence building, then I will create environments or setups where they can have a positive experience. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they receive food or treats or toys. It means that they go somewhere and nothing untoward happens to them. So they learn to have confidence and trusting that the world isn't a scary place.
Yeah.
So over time, what that does is it creates a dog that's really robust. And because of the way that my dogs are socialized, they understand how social etiquette. So they understand if a dog gives them a look or turns away or avoids them, they understand, that dog doesn't want me to intervene or come up to them. So if I have a dog in my home that gives very clear or very strong body language, my dog will read it like a book. Whereas you would find that if you put that dog with a dog that hasn't developed social etiquette and social skills, then that dog will be misread. The dog will invade their personal space. The dog will then react defensively. That dog will be labelled as a problem dog. And actually, no, the dog gave sufficient warning. The problem is the other dog wasn't raised with the correct social skills. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And also, I think often for humans as well, people will sort of look at a dog doing something that's actually probably quite inappropriate and find it cute or funny, and therefore allow it or encourage it. But then when that same behaviour happens in a circumstance that they don't want, they then sort of switch. But yesterday they liked that, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of, it's the same with you find with humans, so if you were to go to somewhere like, I don't know, say the Middle East, you would have a very different social etiquette that would be within that culture. And it isn't for us to say, is it right or wrong? That's the way in which they engage with each other. And as long as you abide by those social etiquette, the socially social etiquette and rules, unwritten rules, everybody's going to get on.
Yeah.
But if somebody breaches that terms, then there's going to be unrest. And obviously, it's down to us as the visitors, so to speak, to go, okay, I understand that your culture asks for the X, Y, and Z. And same way for, Britain has a very distinct culture. We're very like, we're very apologetic, we're very polite. That's our unwritten rule. If you took us and you put us in another culture, or vice versa, if you had, say, somebody that was more outlandish and rash, and you brought them into our culture, we would find that, oh gosh, he's a bit strange, he's a bit loud. We would find that uneasy. But obviously, the education process and the socialization process that we as human beings go through is to understand, oh, okay, that's just his personality, I understand. And also for that person to go, oh, someone doesn't like me, jumping, being in their face. So to learn the nuances of what other people, and that's what, how we all learn to get on. Unfortunately, we don't always take the same path with our dogs, or we don't, certainly as a society, we don't necessarily make that connection that dogs have to undergo for the same process. What we assume is that I'm going to get my puppy and I'm going to take him to the local park and I'm going to let him off the lead and he's going to get on with everybody. But we need to condition that. No different to, how you were raised and I raised my daughter. You probably got into agility and dog sports because your parents went, oh, this is something she's interested in. And probably subconsciously they were thinking, this is a great activity because it's going to give us something to do, as opposed to, inappropriate behaviour, like hanging out in street corners and what have you. So that's what happened with me. Same with my daughter. We're trying to socialise her into activities. So the hope is that when she reaches adolescence, she has things that will occupy her. She'll have social settings where she can rehearse appropriate behaviours and so forth and so forth. So we do it subconsciously with our children, but we don't necessarily do it efficiently or sufficiently with our dogs.
I think people could do with, relating dogs to humans a lot more because, the principles actually aren't that different, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I used to work with young offenders, and you'd find a lot of problems that children have was similar with dogs. So they would reach adolescence, they would get into sort of they would lack some boundaries, they would lack emotional stability, they would lack somebody that was that showed them affection in a healthy manner and so forth. And those lackings was what ultimately caused them to seek it from other sources or act out inappropriately and so forth and so forth. So the same principle can be applied to our dogs. If you raise a dog and you give it emotional stability, you provide it with enrichment, you give it education, you provide it sufficient entertainment, and you give it sufficient exercise, what I call the 5 E's, you should be able to navigate the challenging periods and get them through the other side. But often what happens is there's a misstep in that critical period of development, and then that creates a long-term problem.
Yeah, definitely. So how would you approach over-arousal that happens in the agility ring and nowhere else? So not around agility, like when the dog's actually in the ring running at the time, but then it's fine everywhere else.
Yeah, so that generally will be because of it's normally a communication / handling issue, where the dog is probably seeking or wanting information and clarity. So I would, first and foremost, what I do when I have clients with that issue is I get them to look at themselves, so take the dog out of the equation, making sure that they're consistent with their handling cues or their verbal cues, and depending and making a decision about which one the dog should respond to. Is your dog trained to respond to a verbal cue? Is your dog trained to respond to a body cue? Is your dog trained to respond to both? Is it simultaneously? Is it one after another, and so forth and so forth? Because often you'll find that most people will overestimate the dog's level of understanding. And I always say to people when they have that question, only does it agility. Okay, so then I want you to bet me £1,000 that if you sat on a deck chair and said to him X, Y, and Z, the dog would do it. And then they start to get a bit more dubious. Well, I would feel confident if I said to my dog, a behaviour that I felt, if I was willing to put them in competition, I would look you in the eye and say, well, I'm willing to bet £1,000 that my dog understands whatever this is, and it understands the criteria, and it understands it in all situations, and I can do it back to front, inside out, yada, yada, yada. So unless I have that level of confidence in my dog, I wouldn't put them in that situation. Or I would, if I didn't feel that, and if I couldn't answer that question honestly, I'd be looking at my role in the relationship with the dog.
So often it's probably handlers, that have rushed into it a bit too soon before the dog's sort of mentally prepared for that kind of level of environment.
Or possibly they haven't proof the dog to say, look, if I say to you weaves and I'm running backwards and turning right away from you, I expect you to take those weaves irrespective of my body language. Or if I say left, whatever my left cue is, and I'm slightly mishandling that, I expect you to override my body language and listen to your verbals. And I would say, as an outsider, I dabble in agility and I do it sporadically with my dog. So I have both. I have a unique perspective on it in that I look at it more from an observer's point of view. And the way in which agility is moving it's becoming much more about dog training.
Yes,
and I would
definitely
say that for a period of time, it was very much about handling. So it's really about, if you're fast and athletic and you could get in the right place at the right time, you could probably get a dog to go clear around a course. But was the dogs particularly well trained? Not necessarily. Now I think the way the sport is evolving with faster courses and really clever courses, you have to have dog training skills under your belt. The dog has to understand verbals because those questions are being asked in competitions. The dog to discriminate between a tunnel and a weave, the dog to discriminate between a contact and a tunnel, or whatever the case may be. So the dog, you are forced to layer a certain pass through a course. You're forced to handle at a distance with a certain part of the course. So if your dog doesn't have those skills in place prior to going to a show, not only will that undermine your confidence, but it will also create the dog to be confused or appear to be over-aroused. Because they're now going into competition and you're in the wrong place. So because your dog doesn't understand or doesn't have independent weaves, you need to handle the weaves, which then puts you behind when you get to the the next part of the course.